Hey guys, Sidewinder is my name and I am back for another video. Today's video is going to finally round out the scouting guides that I put together, and this is going to be a Terran versus Terran guide, the only matchup that I've not covered. This particular matchup is going to be Select, or rather this is MVP, the red Terran, versus Select. MVP is probably the best Terran player in the world. Select is really, really good, always underrated, always forgotten, but he's an extremely good player. And this was from BlizzCon, as they did just release all of their replays, which I love. I'm not sure if this was actually contained on stream, but this was a really good match, so if you don't get a chance to, or if you never got a chance to watch these, go ahead and watch this series, which I'm not going to cast because this is going to be a scouting guide. But nonetheless, we're going to talk a little bit about when to scout, what you should be looking out for, the kind of transitions that you can expect, but mostly what your opponent can be capable of at what time. A lot of scouting comes down to basically just kind of eliminating possibilities. So, for example here, let's say, I typically will just watch it from one player's point of view and just point out what scouting information he's getting at what time. But considering that both Terran, we kind of get double the scouting information. There's really not a lot that's going to happen here in the early game, so I'm just going to fast forward quite a bit. But scouting in this matchup early on isn't vital. There's not a ton that your opponent can do that will really catch you off guard. And that's just the nature of the Terran race, because the Terran race is very defensive, it's slow, at least generally speaking. You can hold off a lot of stuff just by having buildings and chokes and bunkers and stuff like that. But it's okay and perfectly safe to scout right after you start your barracks, which is what both these players are doing. When you get in here, you want to see what kind of gas consumption your opponent has, how many barracks they're going to be on, if their orbital command is on time. This is standard stuff that when you're scouting Terran is to check all these things. And this is just to eliminate possibilities. So the possibilities that MVP could be doing, he could have a barracks here. He could also have a barracks here and here too. And if that's the case, he's going to have a little less SCVs. His orbital command won't be transforming as soon as his barracks is coming up. He likely won't have taken any gas geysers just because that's going to slow that down. So you kind of need to eliminate what's possible. If you see this one barracks play with no gas, that means they're not interested in teching anytime soon. So this is probably just going to be a one barracks expansion, and MVP might actually just drop this command center right in Select's face. On the side of MVP, he sees the same thing except for Select does have gas. So this means that Select could go for a second barracks, which is fairly rare, and pressure with that. He could just go factory immediately afterward, which is a little more normal. Or he could just be gathering this gas to try and throw MVP off. So you kind of just have to eliminate everything as well. And MVP can also see that the geyser's been taken and that the command center's there, so there's very likely not extra barracks around, even though he hasn't even scouted every part of his opponent's base. But so it's just kind of understanding, okay, I'm Terran, I know what's possible out of my race, so I need to know what's possible out of my opponent. This early game scout usually won't reveal a ton, but the fact that he sees MVP's command center coming out right now means that he should know how to react to all of this. So he's going to go ahead and throw down a reactor, start quite a bit of Marines off of that. And I'm not really going to cast the series, I'm just going to cast the scouting information that's employed within. Let's talk a little bit about reactions. If you're MVP, or rather if you're Select and you see this command center coming down right now, you can do almost whatever you want and be perfectly fine. You could throw down a factory or a command center of your own. You could attack with a whole bunch of barracks if you already had some extra barracks coming up. There's a lot of different things that you can do and still be okay. One thing that I don't see a lot out of this matchup is just controlling the opponent's natural so that they can't land their command center. And that's another thing you can do. So there's a lot of different things. MVP did see the reactor on Select's barracks, so he knows that there's going to be a lot of Marines incoming. And if you see that, that's typically going to mean that he's going to run probably just a Marine tank composition. And we'll get into compositions here in just a second. The two main compositions you're going to see in the matchup are either Marine Marauder, or I guess I should say Bio, or Mech. The third composition you can see is also Marine Tank. So I guess I should backtrack a little bit and say there's really three main things you can see. And you want to answer what your opponent is doing appropriately. If they're going Mech, you can't just go like Marines. You can't just run Marines into tanks, because you're just going to die. If they're going for a lot of Bio, then you can't afford to try to go into Mech too fast, because they could just hit you with a Marine Marauder timing, which isn't the case in this game because he did see the command center coming down, and he did see no gas. The other thing they could do on one base is Banshees, so you need to be prepared for stuff like that, whether that's pooling scans or getting a fast engineering bay to lay down turrets, or just keeping Marines around your base. And I want to talk a little bit about Cloak Banshees in particular. Cloak Banshees can be a pain in the butt to deal with in this matchup, but the thing about it is that people actually don't handle it all that well at the pro level right now. They usually let their Banshees just do way too much damage when there's ways that you can get around that decently. So if you're going to be seeing something like a Cloak Banshee, you're going to see a barracks coming down in normal time. You're probably just going to see one gas, and as soon as that Marine comes out, he's going to kill your scout, take his second gas, and start his factory. And he's just going to go straight into Cloak Banshees after that. They could also just go gas first, so I don't know how appropriate this is for the level of players that typically watch my videos, but you can also click on these geysers and see how much gas has been mined and kind of map it out to say a factory costs 100 gas. He has not spent any other gas other than the factory, and he's mined however much is off of here. They start with 2,500, so you can kind of put 2 and 2 together that way as well. But what I'm getting at here, and this is really long-winded, I know, is that you need to plan for what your opponent is going to be doing. If you can see that they're going for, let's say for example, if MVP dropped a scan right here, he could see the starport coming down and the tech lab going down. That screams Banshees. So you just kind of have to understand what your opponent is doing and plan against that if you can possibly get that information. Don't be too, I guess, overzealous to burn scans for scouting information, because you don't always need to. You can get subtle information based upon you just poking at his ramp. So when MVP came up here, he saw barracks with a reactor. That's going to mean there's going to be quite a few Marines out. But a barracks and a reactor, if they're both stacked on top of each other, you can produce Marines at an insane rate. So if you ran an SCV up here and all you saw was, what, 8 Marines, you're going to say, wait a minute, if you put the reactor on that right away, he should have a lot more Marines by now. And he obviously doesn't have enough Marines, so you know something else weird is going on behind that. So you know he has a reactor coming down, so what's the natural follow-up to that? It's not going to be anything like Vikings, because there's no reason to throw a reactor on a starport right away and put out Vikings. Probably just going to be Hellions. So you kind of just have to make assumptions based upon what you saw before and make sure that makes sense as to what you can be expecting. So this is kind of a roundabout way of scouting, but this is a weird matchup considering how easily Terran players can deny scouting of any race. So I'm going to fast forward just a little bit here. Select's probably going to go for a Banshee as soon as he swaps these off. No, he's actually going to go for a Medevac, so that's interesting. But so MVP, or rather Select, look at this. He does run a SCV inside MVP's base, and this is always worth trying to do if you can get in this matchup, because sometimes their Marines will be spread out like MVP's were, and especially on this map when the command center is so far away from the ramp, if you can just sneak a probe in there, or rather not a probe, but an SCV in there and see what he's doing, you're going to see everything. You're going to see this tech lab, you're going to see the factory active, so you can probably expect tanks, which is what's coming out. You probably expect medevacs, and you see 2 barracks that are naked. That's probably just going to be Marine tank medevac, very, very straight up and very standard. So Select's going for this push. A lot of times you can scout a Terran based upon what units they have on the field, so this is nothing but Marines right now. And you can scout by aggression rather than just you know, guessing what he's doing or scanning or whatever. So he's going to just be scouting by aggression. He already obviously knows what's going on. But if he didn't and he just saw all Marines here, he's got to think, well, okay, I mean, he expanded quite a while ago. He's got to be spending his gas somehow. So what's he spending his gas on? He's going to be spending his gas, in this case, on, you know, tanks and medevacs. So if you see them with a lot of Marines on the field and they're not showing any gas spending and they've had their bases for a long time, you can't just say, oh, well, he's probably just going to make nothing but Marines, right? No, he's going to be mining gas and putting that gas to work. So you can't really make those assumptions like that. So again, this is just countering what your opponent's trying to do. So if you're Select and he's going Marine tank, you need to find a way to deal with both of those. Hellions do pretty well at killing Marines, obviously, so it's a weird exchange. But if you can get something like Banshees out, or if you can just make his tanks immobile, or rather abuse their immobility, then you can do a lot there. So I don't know how much longer it's necessary to stay in this, but we will continue to as the other players continue to get information. Right now, Select definitely has a lot more information as far as what his opponent is doing. This is a very unusual Hellion Marine play. You really don't see this that often. So MVP right now has to be wondering what Select is going to be doing behind this. This could just be a quick play to show Mac. He could go straight into mech. He could also respawn with Marine tank here, which, I mean, is fairly normal. He knows he has a starport up, so he could be seeing some Banshee and weird Hellion play mixed in with that, straight into Sky Terran, which is fairly rare, but it can work. So MVP needs to stay on top of where Select is going from right now. And what you can see is Select is going for a lot of barracks, so he might just go straight up for a Marine tank with a lot of Marines backing this up. Like, he could swap this barracks and factory once again and go Marine tank. He could just switch into straight bio and fly this factory out, put the reactor on the starport. So this is a situation where I'd say if you're MVP and you're getting attacked with a weird unit combination like this that obviously isn't going to last into the late game, then you need to figure out how he's transitioning. And the transition can be a lot of different things. So this is one situation where you're on 2 command centers. I would not be opposed at all to just scanning. Look at Select actually just picked MVP apart right here. I would not be opposed to just scanning and seeing what's going on in here. Terran players usually cluster all their buildings up like this. They usually won't play stuff like here or back behind the minerals or anything weird like that. They'll usually cluster it all up in their main, so one scan can usually tell you a lot. So if I'm MVP in this situation, I'm just going to go ahead and scan and see what's going on, just so I know what his end game is, because I can see what's on the field now, but he can go a million different ways with that. So we're going to go ahead and continue to fast forward here. This actually is a pretty cool game so far. Select going for a really weird unit composition. He will be dropping once again. MVP going for pretty much the same thing, a lot of barracks. I think this is actually going to wind up Marine tank versus Marine tank, but I don't think MVP really has any knowledge of that. There's a bunch of reactors coming down, so oh my god, this is going to be a lot of Marines. Okay, looks like it's just going to be a ton of Marines, which is really weird considering MVP does have tanks on the field. So yeah, I'm actually really curious what Select is doing. This is a really weird call because tanks waste Marines. And Select is going to have a ton of Marines on the field. Looks like he is going to put out his tech lab, so it's going to be Marine tank like I thought. But he's staying on Marines for a long time, so yeah, a little strange. And I don't mean to do too much commentary since I know this is a scouting guide, but I'm just trying to understand their thought process, or at least Select's. So yeah, this is kind of the stage of the game where most Terran players, once they commit to what they're going to be doing, like Marine tank, you know they're going to be staying on Marine tank for basically the whole game. This is about the time when they're on 2 bases that they decide what they're going to do. They're usually not going to go for all these barracks and then have them idle and go for something like mech, which mech entails Hellions, tanks, sometimes Vikings depending on what they need to answer to, and in addition for spotting. But this is about the time where they're going to commit for basically the rest of the game, up until you maybe get on like 4 or 5 bases and just go all Sky Terran army. So yeah, the common unit compositions you're going to see is just straight up bio, which is Marine Marauder. You could see Marine tank, which is what we're seeing here out of both of these guys. You could see mech, which involves a ton of factories. So you kind of need to understand what's coming out of these buildings if you wind up scanning his base. You could even see Sky Terran, which is pretty rare, but it's a lot of fun if you can run it. The Sky Terran is typically a lot of Vikings, Banshees, Hellions, and occasionally some random units like Thors or a couple of tanks if you want to get there that way. So basically this is about the time where they start to decide they're going to be on 4 geysers worth of spending, at least in terms of gas, and where they're spending their gas is going to be dictating what they're going to be doing for the rest of the game. So both players have a good idea what's going on. MVP is going Marine tank with medevacs, and Select is showing a lot of medevacs and Marines. He could be going Marine Marauder, and MVP doesn't know that, but this composition will fight both of those just fine, so you don't need to worry too badly. Let's jump into just one more game as an example. I think we've said quite a bit here in terms of scouting in this matchup, so I'm going to go into the next game of this series and see if it shows us anything different. Hey guys, yeah, I guess I'm still in the same video, so I don't need to reintroduce myself, but this is MVP versus Select once again from BlizzCon, and we're going to see if anything new comes up in this game. I'll just fast forward it really quickly so we can get through to the important stuff. Like I say in every matchup, you need to know the maps and know where your opponent can spawn. For example, this is on the Shattered Temple, and just recently on the ladder they've made it so you cannot spawn in close positions. So if you're fighting this matchup on the ladder right now and you take an SCV and go scout down here, it's a total waste of time. They can't spawn here, so you need to know where to scout. So you're probably just going to scout here by close by air since it's a less walking distance, and then on the cross position and go from there. But yeah, something I didn't really address in the last portion of this video is that you need to know the maps and know where to scout. And that's exactly what Select is doing, even though ironically during this tournament you could have spawned here, but nevertheless, Select is sending his scout out basically when his barracks is about done. MVP is sending it out just a little bit later. He's going to see Select right here, and MVP is scouting the close position. He sees that Select is not there. This is another thing, is that it can suck if a Terran player walls like this and denies your scout. So if you're in this situation, you need to understand they're walling probably for a reason. And that reason could be that they want to hide what they're going to be doing after this. So in basically every matchup, if a Terran player is sitting in his base like this behind a wall, don't be afraid to send out an SCV or even just a scouting Marine or something and run it up there and let it die just to see what kills it. So you'll be able to see if a tank kills it, or if a Marine kills it, or if a Marauder kills it, or whatever, and that'll give you a good idea as to what they're doing for the rest of the game. In this case, MVP is putting a barracks over here on the right side. This is probably just going to be a Banshee build out of MVP, and that's typically what you're going to see if they wall. Now if they wall, it's going to mean one of two things. Either they're scared and they don't really know how to do anything that involves not walling, and I know a lot of lower level players will think that, so that's one thing. But secondarily, if they open Banshees and they keep their wall open or don't put anything right here and somebody else opens just bio or a lot of Marines, they could just walk right up here and kill them. So they're typically going to have a bunker back here if they feel that they need it based upon what they scout. So yeah, I mean, you need to pay attention to stuff like this and what it could possibly mean. It could either mean they're being afraid, or they're hiding units that just can't stand up in a straight up fight, in which Banshees definitely qualify under. So I was glad we at least saw that, because we didn't see that in the first game. So MVP denies Select Scout, but Select should have a pretty good idea what's going on. Select is opening a Tech Lab and a second barracks, so he's probably just going to go Reaper. And that's, again, another thing that we didn't really mention in this matchup. Reapers are perfect for scouting. If you're Terran and you want to scout in the early game, throw down a Tech Lab, grab a Reaper. You're going to see everything every time. So just go ahead and send a Reaper in here. Look how smart MVP is. He knows this stuff is coming. I think he actually scouted the Tech Lab. So let's take a look at that. No, he actually doesn't know anything, so never mind. MVP is just really on top of his game here. But yeah, if you have a Reaper coming out, you should be able to see pretty much everything, because the Reaper can obviously cliff jump and tell everything that's going on. But you still need to be kind of careful. Like, you can't overcommit to Reapers, and oh my god, Select is going 3 Reapers right off the bat here. And here's the problem. I want to talk a little bit about making builds that are safe against everything. And this build that Select is doing is not safe against Banshees if his Reapers don't do a ton of damage. You can see that MVP wants to go Banshees. It's Starport, Tech Lab's already done, they're being built right next to each other, so it's going to be swapped onto here no matter what. Or at least if he doesn't, he'll be insane. And this sucks, because if you have a lot of Reapers out and you've been spending all of your barracks production time on Reapers, and they show up with Banshees, what do you have that's going to hit that? You have 1 Marine. You're going to lose that easily. And then you only have 2 barracks producing Marines one at a time. They could just easily overwhelm you right there and then. So this is a very risky build out of Select. And if you want to play in these matchups kind of straight up, a more standard style, which is the best way to learn, you need to run builds that are safe against pretty much everything. I would have loved this build if it was just 1 Reaper going in there to scout, but since it's going to be 3 Reapers, I really don't like it, and I actually kind of want to see Select pay for that, because it's so risky. SCV gets a kill. That's pretty funny. Here comes MVP pushing out just a little bit, and MVP still doesn't have really any idea what's going on out of Select. He hasn't seen anything. He's had his scout aggressively denied, so you have to think that if he's aggressively denying scouts, it's going to be something pretty crazy coming out of Select here, basically meaning he doesn't want MVP to see anything. There's now 3 Reapers out. This is actually fairly all-in-ish. Like, he needs this to do a ton of damage in order for it to work. And MVP saw these Reapers coming because of the Watchtower, so he knows exactly what's going on. He's going to try his best to kill whatever he can here, but with proper micro, these Reapers will destroy everything. But as soon as 1 Banshee gets out, this is over. These Reapers won't do anything after that. So, yeah, so this is fairly risky here. I don't know how much more of this I really want to show in terms of it just being like a more entertaining game rather than something we can really learn from. I think we've said pretty much enough about all this. at least in terms of the scouting stuff that you're going to see. You will want to watch out for wild changes off of past 2 bases, but you typically won't see that kind of stuff. You just need to understand what your opponent is doing and understand what you need to put out in order to beat that. That's pretty much what every matchup comes down to, and that's the essence of Starcraft 2. And scouting is a huge backbone to that, is understanding what's your opponent capable of, based on what I've seen, what is he probably doing, and how am I going to beat that. So both of them went in kind of blind. Select had a good inkling of as far as what MVP was going to do, but MVP ran a more safe build. He got a build that got a bunch of Marines out, which did die to the Reapers, and that's okay. He did have a factory ready in case he needed Hellions to deal with a lot of Marines or Reapers or something. He does have a starport out producing Banshees, which not a lot of stuff can beat here in the early game. So yeah, so MVP ran a much better build this game. I would not be surprised if MVP won this game. Yeah, so you kind of just need to basically plan for what your opponent can be capable of, see what he's doing, make assumptions based upon stuff like building positioning and gas being taken and what buildings you see coming down at what time. So I hope I answered everything that really needs to be answered in this scouting guide. There's obviously a lot more intricacies than I pointed out here, considering a lot of things can happen in this matchup. So if you feel confused or if you feel like you need more help at all, leave me a comment down below and I will answer it. And even if I don't, like, I get a lot of comments on my videos nowadays, and some of them just slip past me. So if you left a comment and didn't hear anything back, just send me a message and I will respond back to you that way. I'm more than happy to help out anybody that needs help. So I hope you guys enjoyed these videos. I'll be back for more casts and maybe some more BlizzCon games. We'll see. But stay tuned. I'll see you guys later.